the core question that this paper aims to answer is to what extent, first I have to clarify, what is a steering sectarian strife law? Because has anyone heard about a steering sectarian strife law before? Perfect, because they do not exist outside the Arab region. That's why none of you have heard of them. Steering sectarian strife, let's dissecate the word to understand. Steering sectarian strife. Steering is when you do something intentionally in the intention of having a sectarian strife. What is a sectarian strife? It's a problem between religious communities. Or it is a problem or a conflict based on religion. We have a specific type of laws in the Arab region that regulate or criminalize someone that instigates or initiates a religious conflict. A conflict based on religion or a conflict between religious communities. So, based on the comments I received 2 years ago in the Rome Summer Seminars, I didn't do this essentially, but I transformed the paper into something that I believe is very much more important now, which is a typology. So I went to these 20 laws and I did a typology of these 20 laws and their texts, and we're going to present that typology today. So, there's a problem with these laws inherently. First is that these laws are a colonial result. None of the laws pre-colonial period in the Arab region had the concept of blasphemy, which is also a concept that came from the colonizing countries. The Arab countries inherently, Arab laws at the Ottoman Empire, which was at that time the Arab world, did not have the concept of blasphemy. There was no concept where you were not allowed to say things based on religion. It's a concept that was transplanted by mainly the United Kingdom and France, where you were not allowed to say bad things about the king or about God. So, because of this translation and this colonialism and this interpretation of the criminal codes of the Arab region are mainly translated laws from European origins. Unfortunately, they are interpreted in many ways. So the judges use them whatever they want, and most of the times they don't understand where they come from and why they were put at the start. So these laws have become a tool not only to regulate harm, but to manage identity and loyalty. So it's a 4-part typology. Because of time, I'm not gonna spend a lot of time here because more interesting things are coming next. So the first exercise is, we saw what legal terminology recurs around violence and public order. So, in 20 of the laws, there are 2 laws that we didn't study, in 20 of 22 countries, 14 mention that it's prohibited to incite violence. 9 mention the word hate speech, 8 mention the word national unity and public peace, 4 mention blasphemy and religious defamation, and 1 mentions state security and anti-terrorism. So what's very important is when we look at the chart, we understand that the dominant legal vocabulary present in these laws is responsive to violence, is aiming to protect public order, and regulates instability or intervenes when there's instability in the country. But in the case analysis that we'll see in a bit briefly, but shows more in the paper, is that enforcement often reaches expression that does not directly call for violence. One of the clear examples I can give you, in Tunisia, there was once a case put against a person that wrote a paper comparing Islam and Christianity in personal status laws. So, because the examples and the cases that were given were a bit controversial, and because they were somehow stating that Christian personal status laws were better than Muslim Christian status laws, this person was considered to be steering sectarian strife. In that case showing that somehow connotating that Christians are better than Muslims, and then he was convicted under the steering sectarian strife laws. That's how vague the interpretations can go. I'm going to see other examples. So, we also have, as lawyers, we have a problem with the word public peace, because it's the biggest word one can use in criminal law to include everything. It's a word, public peace means literally everything and nothing at the same time. My public peace can be disturbed if someone says something bad about my religion, but does it really count as a criminal offense? The second exercise shows that 80% of the laws do regulate general speech and expression instead of religious offenses. There's another paper we're working on now specifically targeting blasphemy laws, because this is a debate that we can have at the end, which is a debate that we've always had in the Arab region. Do I have to be able to say bad things about God or curse God or religious institutions to say that I have free speech? That's a discussion for later. But in the Arab countries, most of these sectarian strife laws are laws that are different from the existing blasphemy laws. They are laws specifically there to regulate speech that could steer sectarian strife. Another example applicable in this case is we have a journalist in Lebanon that was convicted for 1.5 years of prison because she criticized, she produced a report showing corruption. That's how vague it is. Corruption, but the 3 targeted ministers in corruption were Christian leaders, Christian politicians. And these politicians together put a claim that she is a Sunni, a Muslim, targeting Christian leaders, and therefore seen to have steering sectarian strife. We see that the punishment is overwhelmingly criminal in these laws. So first, one of the 20 laws only puts fines on speech. 14 of them put a short-term imprisonment, 2 of them have long-term imprisonment, and 3 of them harsh punishment, which in criminal law is usually a death penalty. And the severity patterns shows that the governments are very keen on regulating speech, but also regulating speech that is in the religious domain or has religious connotation. So the concern is that when speech offenses are constructed as threats to the state itself, punishment shifts from public order regulation to an existential defense. Sometimes the countries have considered simple acts to be threatening the life of the nation, which is a word that you will find in all of Hayat al-Ummah, which is in Arabic, life of the nation, which sometimes a speech that they consider offensive under religious context can for them be considered as steering sectarian strife because it threatened the life of the nation. So, what are the terms that we find in these laws? The terms that we find usually include incitement to sectarianism, harm to national unity. National unity in the religious context is usually national unity among religious denominations. Offending religious sentiment, which is a word that you can only find in laws in the Arab region. Offending religious sentiment, which is literally what it says. It's offending someone that believes in something and their sentiment of belief is shaken because of something that you said. Threat to public peace, undermining social cohesion, promoting discord among citizens. All 20 countries that I have studied rely on open-ended terminology. These are terms in the law that we call elastic terms. Elastic terms are terms that the judge can use however they want, wherever they want, to mean whatever they want. And to put, it's a word that means nothing, but whenever you want to push a crime on someone, especially in the field of religion, you can insert that word and it will work. Interesting. So, when we look into the justification of the system, and there's a methodology that we use in the paper to see why this law has a justification. It can be because the constitution of the country is also the Sharia. It can be because the country declares religion, or specific one or two, or Abrahamic religions as the religion of the country, or simply because that law itself mentions a specific religion or religion. So 12 out of 20 sectarian strife laws are religiously founded or religiously justified. This means that religious justification is the most visible rationale. Regime protection is less explicit, and the countries don't really care about saying anything about the regime as long as you're not offending the religion. This is ironic because most of the time the religion is directly linked to the regime, so you're offending everyone basically. So as a result, and the case study of the paper shows that in the end of the day, who are the people that these laws are applied to the most? These laws are applied against academics trying to discuss and have a religious discussion or have a religious discourse. Whenever, this is why these types of conferences are super rare to find in our region, because anytime someone wants to discuss a religious matter, either interpretive or comparative, this is most of the time seen as something that would steer sectarian strife, and which is something very, very unfortunate. So this law was applied in the Minya clashes in Egypt, the Gardia arrest in Algeria, millions of online arrests in Saudi Arabia, Dima Sadek, which is a journalist in Lebanon, activists, Patrick Zaki, also this was one of the laws that was applied to Patrick Zaki in Egypt, and many others. We have 318 cases where this article was applied. These types of articles were applied in Libya and many, many others. What these patterns show is that they show the word incitement. What does it mean? And this is our biggest issue. What does the word "I am inciting a religious or sectarian strife" mean? Am I just, and what can incite it? What is it enough, and what's threshold? This is something that we miss a lot. So the governments therefore rely on a very selective enforcement and very rare protective uses of this law. In conclusion, right? 15 minutes.
Yes, we have 3 minutes, yes.
Perfect. There's this issue that we always discuss in the end. And this is something that I'm very, very much exploring in my PhD. Do I have to say that we have free speech in the country when I want people to be able to curse religious institutions, religious themselves? And this is something that has always been a big clash between the West and the Arab region. Because the blasphemy laws exist, the stealing sectarian stripes exist. So we understand clearly that this problem with these laws is that they are too vague. They are interpreted however the judges want, however the lawyers want, however the government wants. So these laws are too vague, but are they inherently wrong to exist? That's a question that we have to ask. Because do I want to regulate? And it's different because, and here is this is what is in conclusion in the paper, is that if you go on a street in Rome and you say, all Muslims should die, I mean, that's okay. Nothing's going to happen. Go and try and do that in Syria. Go and try and do that in Lebanon. This would directly lead to a civil war. This would, and the higher you are in the hierarchy, the more influence you have being a journalist, being a politician, and you cannot say these things. And so do we actually need a law to regulate stealing sectarian strife? In my opinion, yes we do. And the equivalent in the human rights standards for it is Article 22 of the ICCPR, which regulates hate speech and says, which is the only limitation that is allowed on freedom of expression. Hate speech is not allowed. It's the only acceptable limitation in human rights on freedom of expression. So, two questions, and I'm going to end. First one is, can we consider stealing sectarian strife as a form of limitation to freedom of expression? Yes, they are. But is an acceptable one because they actually protect people from hate speech? So that's a question we have to ask. And I already asked it 2 times, but I really want to end with this question. Do you have to be able to curse religions and to defamate against religions to be able that you are free in speech? That's also a question that I would like to leave. Thank you. This was my legal 15 minutes in this very political scientist conference. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Fadi. Wonderful paper. Many questions, and we're going to invite up now Jamal. Yeah. And let's just make sure we have her.
So good afternoon, everybody. I know this is the last presentation, and I hope not to be boring, so I will try to be as brief as possible. My name is Mohamed Gamal from the American University in Cairo, and from a group of other universities in Cairo, but overall I am in Cairo and from Cairo, so you can call me the Cairo guy. So I am going to present a paper that I am co-authoring with a colleague from Morocco and France, Lalla, Amina, Drhimeur, who unfortunately was not able to join us today. The paper is titled, it is a work in progress, it's not ended yet, but it is titled Negotiating the Religious Authority Through Family Laws, a comparative study of religious elites in Morocco, Tunisia, Egypt, and Turkey. The major focus of this paper is the political behavior of religious elites, the ulama, the official religious elites and religious institutions in Muslim majority countries. Because we actually think that this part of the religious field in the Muslim majority countries are a little bit underestimated and understudied in the literature of religion and politics in the Middle East and North Africa. We are approaching them and articulating them as a relative, independent, and rational political actors who initiate different forms of strategic action and rational choice-based political interactions in public sphere that aims at pursuing and preserving and reproducing their public influence. And we are actually thinking about transforming this project into a larger and more extended research project that investigates the general political behavior and different patterns of political behaviors of the ulama and religious elites, the official religious elites. Because actually most literature is focusing on political Islamists, grassroots religious movements, or religious political leaders, and how do they manipulate the religious field and religious institutions and so on. While we think that this part is a little bit understudied and needs more emphasis. Let's start with the research problem or the puzzle. Egypt, Morocco, Turkey, and Tunisia are all Muslim majority countries. They are all Sunni countries, but with many different structures and arrangements of state and religion. Turkey and Tunisia are usually considered or regarded as the most secular or the less conservative, while on the other hand, Morocco and Egypt are usually described as a more conservative, more religious, or less secular. Despite this difference, the outcomes are relatively similar. There are existing or even rising roles of religious elites in all these countries in the issues and the policies relevant to family laws and family issues or family life in general. We find that religious elites and the ulama and the official religious institutions, even in the or under the secular structures, have certain roles in affecting public policies related to family legislation and family life more generally. These interventions are not necessarily directly political or legislative. It could be also under a moral or symbolic framing, like trainings provided by religious elites, for instance, for couples, married and engaged couples, for instance. So this moral framing, this social interaction and social role and public role of religious elites targets mainly the family issues as the major window for religious elites to reproduce and reassert and even raise and maximize their public influence. And here is those are our questions, research questions. We are asking why, despite these different structures, some countries are enjoy more secular and less conservative structures, and others are more conservative. Why, despite these different structures, we find relevant or relatively similar and rising roles of religious elites affecting and influencing family legislation or family life in general? And then how do religious elites reproduce their public influence through family laws? And here our theoretical framework actually based on the rational choice theory and concepts like strategic action. And as you all know, rational choice means that a political actor make certain political choices and adopt certain political behaviors to reassert and preserve its political survival or to maximize its political authority. But actually, most of the uses of rational choice theory focusing mainly on political elites, political rulers, how politicians use rational choice for their political survival. We try to expand this framework and to apply it on religious elites, religious institutions, who are usually been articulated as simply followers or subject to the severe control of political elites. We are inviting scholars to think differently because those people are relatively independent and they have some sort of strategic action that can reassert and reproduce their authorities. And the family laws we argue that it is the major window for religious elites in 4 countries, and maybe in other Muslim majority countries, to reassert their public, political and social authority and influence. There are some gaps in the existing literature in terms of, or that is focusing on religion and politics in the region in general, and like the politics of family laws in particular. First of all, rational choice theory are being usually used only to analyze the political behavior of politicians and political leaders. And in terms of religion and politics, they usually argue that politicians and political rulers manipulate religious institutions, manipulate their people through religious discourse or some sort of religious policies, or through support, some sort of support and alliances with religious elites. So the political agency of religious elites are a little bit ignored and being or considered an dependent variable, not independent at all. We are trying to understand the political behavior itself of the religious elites from this rational choice. They also have their own rational choice. They also have their own strategic action, which is relatively independent from the political elites, but also considering and taking into consideration the surrounding political context. And also other pieces of literature focusing mainly or paying more attention to grassroots movements and political Islamists. We try to invite scholars and to put more emphasis on official religious elites, the ulama, the traditional Islamic elite, the historic elite. They are still, or they still enjoy some sorts of influence. We need to understand it. And there are some structural approaches that focus on the modern secular structures of the modern state, the combination between family laws and religion as a manifestation of the modern secular logic of governance, as claimed by or argued by Talal Asad and Safi Mahmoud and so on. We try to go beyond this argument because it also ignores the political agency and the political choices and the effect of political context. It ignores too many nuances on how state-religion relations in general are being shaped and changed. So here is the core argument once again. Religious elites are independent, relatively independent political actors. They act and behave and choose their political behaviors and their policies and decisions and relations based on the surrounding political context. And they make the decisions that make them survive and make them or allow them to pursue and preserve their political and public influence. And family laws mainly is a measure in modern era, is a measure window for religious elites to reassert and reproduce their influence. Very quickly to the empirical evidence, we discussed the 4 cases in detail in our paper, but I just would like to give 4 examples for the 4 cases. The first of all in Tunisia, for instance, which has been usually regarded as, very secular or relatively secular, more secular than other conservative countries. Other conservative countries in the Arab region, the ulama in Tunisia accommodated Bourguiba's reforms, but preserved the general public discourse or religious discourse of the state as still policies and family laws that respect religion, and religion is still inherited, that allowed them and provided them with a window later to oppose further secular reformation suggested by President Sisi in 2016. When the political context changed and allowed them to significantly move against family laws changes, they did. So they consider political context. Ahmed al-Tayyib, Sheikh al-Azhar, clearly declared that the only era of influence that remained for religious elites is family laws. So this declaration was a major motivation and idea behind writing this paper, because they really look at the family legislation as their only remaining area of influence, and they will not leave it. When the conservative structure allows them for more influence in this domain, they do, and they don't leave any chance to assert their authority over family legislation. Even in Turkey, which is more secular and more less conservative significantly, the Diyanet in Turkey right now is doing some protocols with other ministries to reassert the moral and religious values and to protect the family unity and family values and so on through certain protocols with the Ministry of Family and Social Solidarity, for instance. And here again, our argument is that religious elites' influence in family legislation or family life is not reduced only to political or legislative influence. It is also extended to moral framing and cultural influence. And the same case in Morocco. Ulama can accommodate reforms. They accommodated most of the reforms suggested recently by the King of Morocco. However, they provided some reservations on the more controversial articles or parts of these reforms, and they succeeded to prevent these changes, particularly in issues related to inheritance and so on. So this is the final slide. I would like just to summarize our core findings, or at this stage we can consider them as assumptions or hypotheses. First of all, official religious elites use family law. They will try to preserve their public, political and social influence through the window of family laws mainly as their major and more relevant domain of influence. And they selectively accommodate reforms initiated by political elites and political leaders. But that depends on the context. When they accommodate the reforms, they justify it religiously. But the major goal is to keeping the major logic is that the main reference of family legislation is religion. And that allows them later to influence and to prevent any changes that they feel or that they see not relevant or unjustifiable at all from religious logic. Particularly, they expand their roles and they act more decisively and in the periods of changing political contexts and political transition. This is exactly what has happened in Tunisia after 2011, after 2011 revolution, and also in Egypt. Both religious elites in Egypt and Tunisia significantly changed their public positions and public influence in family legislation. Al-Azhar clearly succeeded in make constitutional and legal changes that provided it with the upper hand over family legislation, while the ulama of Al-Zaytuna, which are significantly understudied, Al-Zaytuna in Tunisia, significantly understudied institution and elite. They succeeded in preventing sepsis reforms between 2016 to 2019 through unprecedented political activism initiated by the ulama of Al-Zaytuna and other official institutions in Tunisia. That's it. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mohamed, and thank you for staying within time. I'm going to call up Professor Mirza to offer us some comments on both of the papers, and then we'll bring up Fadi and Mohamed. Do you want to stand? Yes.
Oh, am I supposed to sit?
No, you can stand.
I was like, do what you want me to do. Okay. Yeah, sure, I'll sit. All right, well, thank you to Fadi and to Mohamed and to your co-author, Amina, and collaborator for your wonderful papers. Let me begin with Fadi, then I'll come to you, and then I'll see if I can connect the two in some way. So you said you offered your paper, gives a typology of sectarian strife laws.
I'm Fadi.
I'm sorry, Fadi. It's the heat.
It's okay.
Let me address it to the right author. Hate, incitement, blasphemy, social cohesion, national security. The consequences of this is that these create a penal society. And this is a legacy of colonialism. It's something new that was introduced into this region. And the solution to this, to create a better society, is to reframe the legal kind of voice, register to one not of penalties, but to one of rights and freedoms. And this is something that will uphold human dignity. So my question is, can the suggested reforms take place without a transformation of regional and global geopolitics? Can we look at this solely in an endogenous way as a problem that is within the region, or do we have to look at world systems? And the reason I ask this question is that the regime interests are survival. And this survival depends on their degree of their alignment to the centers of global power. If you look at the region, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, the UAE, and Egypt are doing, others, Bahrain, Kuwait, maybe Oman, better than Yemen, and Syria, and Libya, even Lebanon. If you look at Iraq, I mean, that is an exemplary kind of case. And during the war on terror, we know that black sites were opened by the CIA, and they were outsourced to these very cooperative regimes. And so the regime's survival is actually not something that is just their own interest. But if you read someone like Jason Brownlee, who wrote Democracy Prevention, he says that authoritarianism is co-constituted with international partnership. And so these repressive laws for regime survival are actually in the interests not just of those very regimes, but of their the powers of which they serve as clients. You know, yesterday Jethro Kalakday, he talked about the U.S. empire in the Philippines. Is he here? He's not here. But I was thinking about the U.S. empire of jihad, the Catholic empire in the Philippines, the empire of jihad in Afghanistan in the 1980s, or the military empire in Pakistan and Egypt. You know, U.S. presidents have visited Pakistan 5 times in Pakistan's history, each time to visit a military dictator, never to the civilian government. That's interesting. I'm thinking of, if you know, we're outside the Arab world here, but also Iran. There was a time when the U.S. empire was the empire of the Shah. So even today, you know, we have seen that the European diplomats were smuggling in Starlink and so on to foment unrest within Iran. If the regime wants to survive, you know, it's not going to go for human rights and freedoms. It has to suppress in order to protect itself. And so there's a larger picture here within which these laws are constituted and operate. John Bolton, you know, the former national security advisor, and he's had other roles. He was also the UN ambassador. Said that Mossad was walking in the streets of Iran, and we've, you know, side by side with Iranians. And so when a regime hears this openly, it's going to be hard for it to open up. Is sectarian, my last comment to you, is sectarian strife, are these laws a form of sad al-dharai, if you think of, you know, kind of Islamic law, a blocking of the means? So they themselves, you know, they're there, they look arbitrary, but their ultimate purpose is to create this climate of fear and repression, and they can crack down on any time because they need to be able to have that power in order to exist in their current form. So, okay, Mohamed, to you, you know, you said that political Islamists and political kind of elites, secular leaders, these are the two main actors that we normally think of. But there's a third group that's very interesting, It's the official religious ulama, the traditional ulama in the traditional institutions, and we also have to look at them when we investigate Islam, and we're looking at this question of instrumentalization of religion. And it's not that simple, because these traditional ulama actually exercise quite a bit of agency, in a way an interesting partnership with the political elite in order to be able to maintain their own authority. You looked at Egypt, Morocco, Turkey, Tunisia, and you said that despite the differences between these various countries, the outcome is similar. Relatively similar. But mainly the outcome that you're looking at is this rising role of religious elite and their continued relevance. And so my question to you is, you may guess where this is going, is the outcome also similar in terms of the content of the law?
No.
Ah, okay. And so this leads to my question. So they maintain relevance, but they have to maintain relevance by seeding, accommodating to a greater or lesser degree, right? And this changes the content of the law. So I know we are in the European Academy of Religion, but my question is a bit theological, although it can be looked at both ways. Like, what does this mean for the coherence of Islamic thought, given that it is evolving now in these pockets of different states, which is really an interesting paradox, because we are in an age of global instant communication, yet the development of official Islam is taking place in different lines, different trajectories. And so I think this is where the two presentations connect for me, is the center cannot hold. I'm thinking of William Butler Yeats. We are from Notre Dame. This anarchy is loosed upon the world. The falcon cannot hear the falconer. Surely some revelation is at hand. The center cannot. I'm just paraphrasing. So the center cannot hold in geopolitics. If it holds, can we have the change? And if it cannot hold, there will be a transition, perhaps, or at least that will create the conditions, but not the necessary conditions. And then, in your case, there's an interesting center of Islamic thought, which was trans-local. Islamic thought has always been diverse, but there was one strand in it that connected from east to west through these scholarly networks, and those are now also breaking up because of the way that it's evolving in these nation states. So, what will the future of, what do you think it will look like, and what will the transition look like? If you want to say anything about that, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mahan. Fadi, why don't you come up? While he's coming up, I'm going to make two announcements. We have about 15 minutes. I'm going to just do like we did before, and all of our questions and comments are going to take a long round, and then give them each 5 minutes to respond. I have good news for you. We are moving to a bigger room for the last panel, where we're going to be more air-conditioned, and hopefully... So, you just have to hold on to the heat for this last 10, 15 minutes. So with that said, who would like to get us started? Yes, go ahead. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you again for an amazing panel, and my interventions are directed towards Fadi's work, and I guess they're both directed towards more future directions of this work, given you already published this. And the first is a more comparable work towards, I don't think the Arab world is unique in terms of the history of these laws, because if you look at the colonial genealogy of very similar laws in South Asia, for example, just extremely similar, and if not exact language also comes there. So we have laws which talk about outraging religious sentiment and promoting enmity between groups, and groups in those laws are defined as sects and religious orders as such. And that genealogy is also similar in the subcontinent, because those laws also similarly come under British colonial rule. And I think that has extreme relevance for your work also, because parts of the Arab world, for example, Aden, or modern day Yemen, for example, was ruled by the civil and criminal code of British India. So there was not an independent criminal code, so I guess there are linkages and transferences in that sense. And I think it's also relevant because if you look at the case of modern Pakistan, especially post-Zia, a majority of the conclusions that you've drawn in the Arab world probably fall very similarly in the Pakistani case as well, and that could be a comparison to look at. My second question has to do with your intervention regarding elastic terms, and I was curious as to the inevitability of elastic terms in these things, because when the purported crime is one of sentiment, feelings and emotions, and given those ideas in and of themselves are elastic, then the language of the law has to be elastic in response to those things. Similar to why, like for example, Official Secrets Acts never define secrets because you want to be open-ended. So given you concede that there is a degree of inevitability or acceptability of these laws, where do you think the possibility can be in terms of tightening the language, given the crime in itself is elastic in some form, I guess?
Thank you so much, Yash. Tahrir, and then Alexander.
Quickly, thank you both for your wonderful presentations. To Fadi, when these laws were being produced initially and the discussions around those laws, was it to uphold the rights of minorities or to restrict the critique of the majority religion, which means Islam in the Arab context? I am also concerned, just like Yash was just mentioning, in the South Asian context, for example in India also, there are demands for whether there should be a blasphemy law or not. Even if it is not there, all the other elements, just like you mentioning about offending religious sentiment, which is pretty much there, the law is pretty much there. So, whether it is to protect the minorities or not, I think that is a crucial question, even though it do have the colonial genealogy. And to Mohamed, just quickly, family laws are the last vestiges of Islamic law, whether it is, the colonial remnants of the Islamic law. The Mohammedan law in India is also in the same way. So, religious elites harping on to these family laws, are actually to exert their own authority, as you are arguing, or whether it has to do with their own condition in the nation state context?
Thank you very much. Alessandro.
Thank you. Two questions for Fadi and two questions for Gamal. Fadi, you speak about elastic clauses, what lawyers call usually general clauses. And have you seen jurisprudence? Because it's not exactly true that judges use so freely this word, so it would be interesting to know how they explain the use of these clauses in the legal text. The second question is, what kind of religion is protected? You say that 14 cases was more about religion, the use of the protection. What kind of religion is protected when it is used to apply this law? For Gamal, do you think that National Corporation of Imam is a religious elite or not? Because if you think that is an elite, there is the Tunisian case of the Syndicat Général des Imams, that at the time of the Colibé, and so at the time of the reform, of the proposition of the reform of succession law, was in favor. Then Fadila Shur, this important person, yes, now it's not. So it's not just question of a religious elite. And the second is, what is the debate and the role of religious elite in the present reform of Egyptian family law, and if the fact that is not so public, this debate, is just to avoid the involvement of religious elite in the debate.
Thanks so much. I'm going to come down here.
Sorry, Michael, another methodology question. Thank you so much, Mohamed, for the presentation and the research. We're grateful that you shared it with us. I just have a question regarding your methodology. I was wondering if you had a chance to create space in your research for confounding factors, alternative explanations that might explain the behavior of these religious elites. And if so, for example, if the scriptural duties, for example, are one of those confounding factors, and how did you think about constructing indicators? How are you constructing indicators to differentiate between scriptural duties, for example, as confounding factor, and political agency? Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your presentations. My question is to Mohamed. It's not really a question. I'm just curious. You mentioned earlier that there's a focus on family law, and I'm curious if inheritance law falls within the scope of family law. That's the first chunk of the question. The second one kind of echoes what Professor Mirza presented earlier in terms of the positionality of family law in Muslim majority countries and what that means to the sense of the ummah, So family law is not to be taken lightly, the centrality of family in Islam and its meaning to the idea of ummah more broadly. Would it be considered as one of the smallest units of analysis that should not necessarily be neglected, and maybe that would tie into the inheritance law question? Yeah. Thank you.
I'm going to give the last question, sorry, to Hachem.
Thank you both for your presentations. So I have a question for each of you. So for Fadi, my question is whether you can think a little bit about, and I think this echoes what Dr. Mirza was talking about, a little bit about the context in which these laws are being applied, right? In most Arab countries, it's authoritarian context. And I'm wondering if you could think a little bit about the capacity aspect of it. So these laws being in place for the state to have the capacity to police and surveil their populations. And I think you hinted at some of the cases you were mentioning where it was used to target journalists and other individuals. And to what extent is this about state capacity, and is there any variation across these states as well, right? And for Mohamed, my question is, so you set it up in a way where you paired, if I remember correctly, Egypt and Morocco, right, and Turkey. Egypt and Morocco, Turkey. Yeah, exactly. So my question to you is, why is it that in all four cases family law is the focus? Because I thought it was going to go in a direction where you would say Egypt and Morocco is where they only have control over family law, and then in the other two cases it's not only family law but it's also other areas. And so if you're conceptualizing the official religious elites as independent actors, then those other two cases, Turkey and Tunisia, you should see them focusing on even more beyond family law. So I was wondering if you could reflect on that a bit. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hachem. Wonderful set of questions. 5 minutes each. We won't get to answer everything, but then we'll have to break.
Thank you so much. Too many questions, too hard questions, but I will try to answer as much as I can. For Mehran, thank you so much. And this point of the evolution of official Islam in Muslim majority countries is really a great issue of my concern and my research interest. That's why I'm thinking of transforming this paper into an extended research project that studies and investigates the political behavior of religious elites, not only on the internal politics, but on the regional level and even international and the global level. Because you mentioned the committees, committees in the region, committees in the UAE compete with committees in Qatar, and what Al-Azhar has to do with them. How do religious elites in different countries coordinate together different issues? What are the issues that are being coordinated and what not? That brings me to your question, Yasmin, because I don't think that they coordinate in terms of family laws at all. So the act for the family laws or family issues strategically depends on their national contexts. That's why there are many different outcomes in terms of the laws, the content of the laws itself. So it depends on the history, the historical evolution of the laws, and the political contestations surrounding the public policy or public law making processes, in which ulama are involved in many different ways in all these countries. So they don't coordinate regionally what will they do for family laws, what is the Islamic thought in family, for instance. This is a separate stage or a separate domain, but for the strategic political action in every and each country, they act strategically in too many different ways, depends on the political context and the political opportunities in the political science language available for them. For your question regarding colonialism and family laws, I don't know his name, but he, okay. So it is, okay, family laws, modern family laws could be regarded as effect of colonialism or as like a manifestation of the modern secular logic of governance, as articulated by Talal Asad and Sami Mahmoud and so on. But that does not mean that we don't have to understand what religion is doing, how religion is being interpreted, how religious elites and religious scholars are being involved in the process of making these laws, even if they are colonial, they are modern. Their logic itself is secular, because the pre-modern secular of governing family issues was completely different. But religion adapts, and there is a very interesting concept made by Peter Berger regarding this point, which is the adapting or adaptive strategy that is adopted by religious institutions and religious elites in modern and secular eras to preserve their influence. So this could be also an answer to this question. Elite or not, I think this is your question, Farid. Thank you so much. I really think about it. Should I frame them as elites or institutions? I think that's a very important methodological question. I need to answer it. But at least I try to understand both elites and institutions. And by elites, we may refer to the leaders of religious institutions, leaders of even independent religious or clerics movements, like Fadl Ashur, for instance. So those are the elites, the leaders, those who push and lead the groups of ulama, either institutions or like social and religious leaders. And the current transformations, that asserts my argument. Al-Azhar right now is very strong when just, the government passed a project, family law project to the parliament without consulting Al-Azhar. And many people asked Al-Azhar, do you agree of this, what is your relation to this project provided by the government to the parliament? Al-Azhar issued a statement and declared that we know nothing about this project. So directly, the day following, the project was sent to Al-Azhar, and Al-Azhar started to be involved in the process, and we know nothing since then. So it seems to be too many reservations. I need to discuss with you the issue of methodology. I need to learn from you about, because I think this is a very important. But we are doing a qualitative research, so we are not very interested in variables and so on. It's a qualitative comparative study, but I think we need to talk after the session. Thank you.
So, very quickly, can suggested reform takes place without looking at the word systems? Man, this is a very important question, and I have another paper about this, studying the reservations on international treaties that are justified by religion, also published on Arab Journal of International Law. It talks about a question that is addressed by Abdullah Naim, by Masoud Bazouin, by Wa'il Halla, by Abdullah Shahid, all scholars from the Arab region, international law and religion, that have says the West has understood that they have to stop attacking the Arab region because of the way they do human rights. When a country says we implement this treaty or this provision of human rights based on Sharia or based on Islamic law, we have to, the first reflex does not have to be this is something bad. It has to be what does it mean. We have to understand what does it mean when a country says we are implementing this law based on Sharia law. And then we can discuss. So this is what has to happen around legal order, and it's something that I think the West, in terms of scholarship, have understood. And the word Arab countries have to make more effort in explaining themselves. When a country says we are implementing this law this way, what does it actually mean? And they have to give more explanation. So there needs to be a dialogue, and there needs to be more effort between both. That's one thing. You say that some countries are doing better than others. I have a question. What does it? How are you quantifying the betterness? How are you quantifying who is doing good and who is doing not? Because some of the countries you said are doing good, I don't really agree, and some of the countries you said are doing bad, I don't really agree. So I think we have to put strict criteria of who is doing good and who is doing bad, and then maybe we can assess. Finally, on the similarities of the paper, I don't agree that personal status is the last area where they have influence. Blasphemy laws also is an area where they have influence. So it's not their only one. Blasphemy law, this is a very clear link between
in conservative contexts.
No, in all of the contexts. Lebanon is not a conservative context, but they do have a lot of influence in blasphemy laws as well. So this is something very important. A big question also to link the two papers, finishing with Mahan, I have 3 minutes still, I have a recorder here. It creates a very important thought that there is a right to people to self-determine, right to people to determine themselves. So before we go in and say abolish blasphemy laws, do the people want this? And then I go to the last question and give two important examples. There was a survey that was done in the Arab world whether people from the Arab world want to abolish blasphemy laws. 73% of the people don't. Lebanon we had Adyan Foundation where I work had a very surprising example on this. We had elections for youth and we created a mock parliament, non-religious parliament. 64 youth aged between 18 and 25. Long story short, we made them discuss the issue of blasphemy laws, the law abolishing the blasphemy laws in the country. It has failed. Youth between 18 and 25 don't believe that we should abolish blasphemy laws in Lebanon. So this raises a very important question. Do the people want to remove person status laws? Do the people want to remove blasphemy laws? That's something that we have to understand. There is a core, we're talking about the elite, we're talking about the government, but we still need to understand that people are attached to this religiously, Christians, Muslims, all of them, people of the region, they are still attracted, they still want this. So that's also something that we have to understand. I thank you for the comment on South Asia. Of course, there are a lot of similarities, but for my work, and my PhD is about the Arab world, so that's why I haven't gone into further explorations, but of course, a lot to understand. These elastic terms are inevitable, and there are positive examples from India, from South Africa, where with the law, you present, in the preamble of the law, you provide a sheet that explains what does every word mean, and this is how ultimately it does not restrict and remove the elastic laws altogether, but it creates less leeway. When you explain what the word means, sentiment, public order, blasphemy, when you give an explanation, and this is where we can start to do a bit of limitations. 50 seconds. Jurisprudence is...
I like this guy.
There are jurisprudence in the paper. So there are cases that I discussed in the paper, but I have 15 minutes here, so I didn't present them. There are cases and laws and specific numbers and what cases from which countries and how they are applied, so they are in the paper. Of course, we have to take into consideration the context of the countries. And what kind of religion is protected, this is very important. And this is what the definition does. This is when we say religion is protected, we make a list of what we protect. Are the religious leaders protected? Or the religion itself is protected? Ultimately, of course, you know that in philosophy of the law we teach one thing, that law is not there to protect the religion, it's there to protect the people practicing the religion. And this is where the big difference for us is, but that's something unfortunately that does not work in the region. 0 seconds, thank you.